A theme, a thread that will run through all of our presentations today is time. And so last year at this conference, a key theme was if. If such and such a thing was plausible through machine intelligence, then what would be the implications for business? This year, given everything that's happened over the last 12 months, it's no longer if. So the questions this year in many domains, whether it's navigation or translation or all sorts of forms of automation, the question has become, when will this happen? And therefore, what are the investments that I need to make today? So many of the questions we're no longer asking if, because we know now the path we're on, and it's just a matter of turning the crank. We are turning the crank on increasing prediction accuracy to get to commercial grade predictions of one type or the other. Last year, we opened the conference by trying to create an economics framework for the discussion. And the way we did that was we recast the rise of AI as thinking about it in terms of a drop in the cost of prediction. Because once we recast AI as a drop in the cost of prediction, then we could use all our familiar economics tools for having a sense of what does this mean. Because now it's simply a drop in the cost of something, and all our traditional economic tools apply. And so we said, okay, when the cost of prediction falls, we'll use more of it. And furthermore, we'll use it for things for which we've never used prediction before, because now it's much cheaper. Furthermore, it will change the value of other things that aren't prediction. So, like in all things in economics, when the cost of something falls, the value of the complements to that thing go up. So the complements are everything that we use together with the thing for which the cost has fallen. So in the case of prediction, the obvious first one was data. That as the cost of prediction falls, the value of data goes up. Perhaps less talked about is judgment, human judgment. As the cost of prediction falls, human judgment, which we also use in decision making under uncertainty, the value of judgment goes up. As the cost of prediction falls, the value of who owns the decisions go up. Because predictions are only useful to the extent that they are inputs into decision making under uncertainty. And so the question is, who owns those decisions? Because those decisions just became more valuable as the cost of prediction fell. And decisions are a complement. At the same time, the value of certain things go down. And the one that probably has attracted the most attention is, of course, human prediction. So as the cost of machine prediction falls, the value of human prediction, a substitute, also falls. And we have human prediction riddled in our days. Just this morning, your decision of whether to brush your teeth before or after breakfast, your decision to come to this conference in the first place, your decision of where to sit, all those were decisions that had underlying some form of predictions that you were making about the outcomes associated with your decision. Okay. And we talk about prediction here in a very general sense, which is prediction is simply generating information we don't have from information we do have. So that's all the traditional stuff you think of when you think of prediction, like forecasting, but it's also classification and all sorts of other similar data type problems. So today, when we focus on time, if you go to a computer science conference, a common exercise near the end of the day at a computer science conference or a parlor game with machine learning folks is they ask each other, when will something happen? When will we have the first autonomous vehicle that drives from Halifax to Vancouver? When will we have the first fully autonomous lights out Amazon fulfillment center? When will we have a machine that reaches human-like intelligence? And the researchers always sort of smirk and they nudge and wink at each other, and they often caveat everything they say with, well, we don't really know, this is all speculation. And then, but if they're forced, they will give some sort of, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. They'll play the, how many years game. But they always sort of think of it as a joke. Because that's not their focus. Their focus is on just building their AIs as fast as they can. But in this room, 2 blocks up from the computer science department in the business school, it matters a lot. We take our speculations of how fast things will occur very seriously, even though we know much less than they do in the computer science department. They have much more insight into what's actually happening on the frontier, but we actually have to take our guesses more seriously. And the reason is because we are deploying real resources based on a thesis of how fast things will happen. And don't kid yourself. For those of you who think, well, I'm not making those guesses, yes, you are, because by deciding not to make an investment, that's still a decision. So you are deciding not to, while companies like Google are deciding to. And so the key theme here is time. How fast will these things happen? So here's a thought experiment. We find that this is a helpful way of just thinking about the development of AI in the context of time. In your mind, imagine like a radio knob. And when you turn it up, the thing you're increasing is not the volume, but it's the AI prediction accuracy. Okay, so it's a knob of prediction accuracy. And the thought experiment is simply what happens as you turn the knob. Okay, so let's go to an AI that everyone's familiar with, the Amazon recommendation engine. So when you go onto the Amazon website, most of you will notice that there's a recommendation engine that's suggesting what Amazon predicts you might want to buy. And sometimes you pay attention to it, sometimes you don't. For myself and my co-authors, this prediction engine is pretty good. It's correct about 5% of the time. Okay? And when you think about the millions of items in the Amazon inventory, the fact that out of every 20 items it suggests, we buy one of them, that's pretty good. So out of every 20, it gets one right. That's quite good. So keep that in mind, that's roughly, for us at least, that's roughly the accuracy. And so the way we use Amazon today is we go onto the website, we shop around, we see things we like, we buy them, we put them in our basket, we pay for them. Somebody at the Amazon warehouse or fulfillment center receives the order. They collect things off the shelves that are brought to them by their Kiva robots. They put them in a box, and they get shipped over to our house. They arrive on our doorstep, and we open the box and get our stuff. Now, here's the thought experiment. Imagine turning the knob. And so right now, they're getting 1 out of 20 right. Turn the knob. All the machine learning team at Amazon working hard, improving their algorithms, they get it to 2. They get it to 3. Then let's say they make a data acquisition, let's call it Whole Foods, and they learn about things that we do offline, the things we buy, when we buy them, what time we go to the store, all that stuff. They learn more and more about us. They turn the knob. 4, 5, 6. At some point, and they don't have to get to Spinal Tap levels here, at some point, let's say they get to a 7, or an 8, or a 9. There's some number where when they get good enough at predicting, all of a sudden somebody at Amazon says, why are we waiting for them to order before we ship? Like, we're pretty good. We're pretty good at predicting what they want. Why don't we just ship it and it arrives on their doorstep before they've even ordered it? Now, you might ask, why would they do that? Because then they'll have to return all the things that they don't want. But at Amazon, they would say, but then we get a greater share of wallet. Because all those things that you might have bought at Amazon, but you buy somewhere else because you're in their store or you're on their website, we will preemptively get them onto your doorstep. So before you even have a chance to go to someone else's store, they're already on your doorstep from Amazon. Furthermore, think about all the things that you think to yourself at some point, oh, I think I'd like to get this or that, but you never get around to ordering it. Just the friction of ordering it is too high. Well, now you don't have to because they've changed purchasing from opting in to opting out. So the usefulness of this thought experiment is that by turning the dial, where we end up is thinking through the change in strategy. So Amazon moves from a shopping, then shipping model to when the dials turn far enough, shipping, then shopping. They ship to you first, then you shop on your doorstep. Furthermore, once the stuff arrives on your doorstep and there's a number of things now that you don't want and you need to return, even though it's still in Amazon's self-interest to do that and incur the cost of dealing with all those returns, Amazon says, okay, now we need to reduce the cost of those returns. So let's say they invest in a fleet of trucks, a delivery service that goes down your neighborhood street once a week and picks up all the things that they ship to you that you didn't want. So now they've vertically integrated into a collection service all because of turning the dial. They turn that dial and they transition from shopping then shipping to shipping then shopping, and they vertically integrate. And for those of you who are sitting in the audience thinking, that's absurd, why is he using such a crazy example? Maybe they won't do it, but it's not like they've never thought of it. This is their patent on anticipatory shipping. Okay, so what does it mean when a company like Google says, we are becoming AI first? AI first means exactly one thing. It means they are taking the dial and putting it to the apex of their strategy. That's what AI first means. Okay? AI first means putting the dial at the very most important spot in their strategy. So, for example, when they say, well, we're moving from mobile first to AI first, well, what is mobile first anyways? Mobile first effectively is, okay, we're going to put the emphasis on being good at mobile. But then you ask yourself, well, doesn't everyone want to be good at mobile? Who would say they don't want to be good at mobile? Does that mean everyone is mobile first? No, because what this definition is missing, the way that economists would frame it, is they're missing the trade. The trade-off is the bottom part, is that, yes, they're going to focus on improving their mobile experience at the expense of everything else. They're willing to cannibalize their website, their offline. They're willing to sacrifice those in order to maximize the performance of their mobile. So what does it mean to be AI first? This is what Peter Norvig at Google's wrote in response to this question on Quora. He says, with information retrieval, anything over 80% recall and precision is pretty good. Not every suggestion has to be perfect, since the user can ignore the bad suggestions. With assistance, there is a much higher barrier. You wouldn't use a service that booked the wrong reservation 20% of the time or even 2% of the time. So an assistant needs to be much more accurate and thus more intelligent, more aware of the situation. That's what we call AI first. Now, what an economist would add on to Peter Norvig's answer is, and the trade that you're willing to make is basically everything else. In other words, when AI is first, that means something else becomes second. Maybe it's revenue, maybe it's consumer experience, maybe it's privacy information. Whatever it is, they're making a trade to make AI first, to maximize the prediction accuracy. Okay, so then when companies come to us at the Rotman School and they say, hey, Google is doing 1,000 projects in AI and they're AI first, we're not making that kind of investment. Are we falling way behind? Are we way under investing in AI? And the response is, that depends on why you're under investing. One answer, which is nicely described in a research paper about a different technology. This paper was written 60 years ago, in 1957, by an economist at Harvard named Zvi Grilikis. And he was studying the diffusion of a technology that was important roughly 100 years ago, which was hybrid corn seed technology. And what he noticed, so this map on the horizontal axis are years, and the vertical axis is the percentage of acreage that we're using this hybrid corn as opposed to open pollinated corn. And what he saw was, look how fast Iowa adopted this new corn technology compared to, for example, Texas and Alabama. And the question he asked is that just because Texas and Alabama farmers aren't as smart as Iowa farmers? And his answer was no. That what he discovered was that, first of all, hybrid corn was not really just a seed technology. It was an invention in the method of inventing. It was a way of creating new kinds of seeds, just like AI is a method of inventing. And furthermore, the return on investment for investing in hybrid corn seed was much higher in Iowa than it was in states like Alabama. And so it wasn't that Iowa was smarter, it's that they were simply responding to economic incentives. They had a higher return on investments. Then as the cost of hybrid corn seed technology fell, it became more feasible for other states to enter. So one answer to the question of why are so many companies, including many of those represented in the room today, why are so many investing so much less than Google right now? And the answer might be because the return on investment is much lower for many of you than it is at Google. That would be one logical explanation. But there's another explanation. And that's an information explanation. It may be that you're investing much less because Google knows something that you don't know. And that thing might be that Google has a different thesis on time. That their thesis on how fast things will move are different than ours or yours. And so then the question becomes, in other words, if something is going to be commercially viable in 3 years or 20 years, that makes a big difference with regards to how much we're going to invest today. If we think something's going to happen in 3 years, we'll invest very differently than if we think it's going to happen in 20 years. And so a theme for throughout today that I think you'll find very useful is every time you see one of the presentations, many of which are very early stage, think to yourself, how fast will the dial change? What will be the ramifications as the prediction accuracy increases? Okay, so the last thing I'm going to comment here is on this point of dissonance. Many people that come to the Rotman School to discuss AI, what we found is that they are experiencing some dissonance. And what I mean by that is that they look at these products like the Amazon recommendation engine or Siri or any point solution AI application, and they say, this is remarkable, it's very interesting, and it's a significant accomplishment, but it's not really that transformational. So, for example, the recommendation engine on the Amazon website is not transformational to Amazon's business. So what's all the fuss about AI? Because on the one hand, they see these things and they say they're very neat and they're clever, but they're not transformational. But at the same time, they see this. This is the chart of venture capital going into AI projects. And don't worry about the vertical axis, the amounts, just the shape of the curve. It's so steep. Some people refer to this. They say there were 4 reports that came out of the President Obama's White House in the last 2 terms of his presidency. 4 reports specifically focused on artificial intelligence and the effect on the American economy. In other words, he was in a rush to lay out a bunch of concerns and opportunities associated with AI and how the American economy should prepare for what was coming around the corner. So in the last 2 quarters, 4 reports. Some people turn to the fact that after Google announced that they were going to be AI first, so many other companies followed. Other people say, hey, in July of this year, the government of China published their AI strategy, which was dramatic. And this wasn't just a marginal investment in AI. It was quite astounding in terms of how aggressive they were going to be at developing AI in that country. They had a 2020 goal, a 2025 goal, and by 2030, their goal was to be dominant in every area of AI across the world. Then, of course, in the beginning of September, the president of Russia made his pronouncement that AI is the future, not just for Russia, but for all of humankind. And then he went on to say that the country that leads in AI will be ruler of the world. And then a few weeks later, here in Toronto, we hosted what I think was so far the greatest gathering of economists focused on the economics of AI. So we had former Treasury. We had the former chair of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, Austin Goolsbee. We had the chief economist of Google, Hal Varian, the former chief economist of Microsoft, Susan Athey, and a bunch of others, including the person in the bottom left, Professor Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel Prize winner in economics. And for those who aren't economists, will be most familiar with him through his popular book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And probably there's almost nobody on the planet who's thought more about thinking than Professor Kahneman. And so near the end of the conference, he came up to make some remarks to the group gathered here. And this is what he said. He was referring to Yann LeCun, who spoke earlier the day before, who's the head of AI at Facebook. And he said, Yann LeCun said yesterday that humans would always prefer emotional contact with other humans. That strikes me as probably wrong. It is extremely easy to develop stimuli to which people will respond emotionally. An expressive face that changes expressions, especially if it's baby-shaped, gives cues that will make people feel very emotional. Robots will have these cues. Furthermore, it is already the case that AI reads faces better than people do. Undoubtedly, robots will be able to predict emotions and development in emotions far better than people can. I can imagine that one of the major uses of robots will be taking care of the old. I can imagine that many old people will prefer to be taken care of by robots, by friendly robots that have a name, that have a personality, and that are always pleasant. They will prefer that to being taken care of by their children. Then he went on, and he closed his remarks with the following. He said, I want to end on a story. A well-known novelist wrote me some time ago that he's planning a novel. The novel is about a love triangle between 2 humans and a robot. And what he wanted to know is how would the robot be different from the people? I propose 3 main differences. One is obvious. The robot will be much better at statistical reasoning and less enamored with stories and narratives than people are. The other, much less obvious, is that the robot would have much higher emotional intelligence. The third is that the robot would be wiser. Wisdom is breadth. Wisdom is not having too narrow a view. That is the essence of wisdom. It's broad framing. A robot will be endowed with broad framing. When it has learned enough, it will be wiser than we people, because we do not have a broad frame. We are narrow thinkers. We are noisy thinkers. And it is very easy to improve upon us. I do not think that there is very much that we can do that computers will not eventually learn to do. Okay, so I think this is the source of the dissonance. is that people, on the one hand, they look at what's around them. They see the Amazon recommendation engine, one of the greatest AI companies on the planet, and they say the recommendation's interesting, but it's not transformational. On the other hand, these people are saying such spectacular things about AI. So how do we reconcile those two things? In my view, the answer is your thesis on time. The answer is, how fast do you think the dial will turn? Because right now, in many of these cases, the dial's on 1 or 2. We are still very early. And if you think the dial will take another 20 years, then it's fine to be here and leaning back in your chair and reasonably complacent and be entertained. For those of you who think the dial will probably turn more quickly than most others think, and furthermore, for those who think that the speed of the dial turn is not linear, that is very likely exponential. And if you believe that, then you'll be leaning forward in your chair throughout the day. This is a report, one of those 4 reports from the White House. And in this report, the US government had a thesis on time regarding AGI, general intelligence. And what they said here was, the current consensus of the private sector expert community with which the NSTC Committee on Technology concurs is that general AI will not be achieved for at least decades. The NSTC Committee assessment is that long-term concerns about superintelligent general AI should have little impact on current policy. Now, I'm not here to say whether this is right or wrong, but the point is they're taking a position on time. They've developed a thesis on time. Now, what you should be paying I think attention to is this afternoon, right after lunch, you're going to hear 4 companies that are at the top of their game investing on making sure that's wrong. They are competing with each other to be the first in the world to develop a general intelligence. And they've raised many millions of dollars to achieve that goal. Okay, so there are, of course, many companies, when the internet came along, that had a thesis on how fast that would happen that was fatal. At the same time, today, there are many other companies, not just the Googles, some of what we used to call old economy companies, that have a thesis that's encouraging them to make significant investments today. So what I encourage you throughout our conference today, what I think you'll get the most out of it, is to listen to how fast you think these things are moving, take some cues from what people are saying, develop your thesis on how fast the dial will turn, and enjoy the rest of the session.